If you go, what does a successful e-commerce business owner look like to us? It is that. It's super organized, really engaged with their team, with their stakeholders, really, really invested in their numbers.
I've seen a guy, he came to us and he had like a 200 grand Facebook debt for all these ads that he was running that weren't actually at all profitable. I'm like, man, you've got no choice but to liquidate here.
A lot of the clients that come through our door will probably tell us from the get-go that they know what their GP is, but 9 times out of 10, it's always wrong.
Welcome to Add to Cart, Australia's leading e-commerce podcast that express delivers all you need to know in the fast-moving world of online retail. Here's your host, Bushy.
Welcome to another episode of Add to Cart. I'm Bushy and I'm joining you from the land of the terrible people, otherwise known as Brisbane, Australia. On Add to Cart, we welcome everyone to share and listen to e-commerce stories. The more diverse, the better. I want to especially welcome the traditional owners and the original storytellers of the land that we are on, our Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander listeners, to join us in our e-commerce conversations and our community. Now, speaking of community, we are excited to have the Add to Cart campus open for access. What's the Add to Cart campus, I hear you say? Put simply, it's a learning community for e-commerce professionals. And it feels like it's what we've been building at Add to Cart for many years. Free to join, campus has lunch and learn webinars, the latest e-commerce resources, a job board, and a heap of ways to learn with industry professionals and your peers. Whether you're an e-commerce manager, a founder, or simply finding your path to a career in e-commerce, we'd love to see you in there. Register to join campus at addtocart.com.au/campus. I've found that there are generally two types of people in the world. Those that know their way around a profit and loss account and maybe even secretly enjoy it, and those who just don't. Which one are you? Whether you love or loathe the bottom line, it can't be avoided if you want to build and scale a successful e-commerce business. My guests today are here to help. They are numbers experts with a special interest in the unique quirks of e-commerce. Chiha and Natalie McDermott join us from Kelly+Partners Accountants, an ASX-listed company with branches in Australia and expanding globally. I first met Danny and Nat at Retail Global, and I loved their approach to e-commerce and the numbers behind e-commerce. Danny and Nat are both partners at the Northern Beaches branch in Sydney, working with around 50 e-commerce brands with a turnover running from $50,000 to $50 million. In this chat, Danny and Nat share what an e-commerce business baseline gross profit margin should be and why it is the number one metric that we should keep an eye on. They also talk about the non-financial KPIs you need to be paying attention to and how much you should be spending on marketing. So with that in mind, time is money. Let's get into our conversation. Thanks to our partners, Shopify Plus and Deliver In Person, here's our conversation with Natalie McDermott and Danny Chiha from Kelly+Partners Accountants. Nat and Danny, welcome to Add to Cart.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tom, Nate.
So good to have you guys here. We had an awesome dinner at Retail Global.
It's because you were drunk.
Well, we're recording this at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning, so I don't think it'll be the same conversation. It might be a different conversation. That was such a fun night. And Danny, I learned something about you in that you, well, actually learned this afterwards. You're an international rugby league star representing Lebanon. I'm like, how do you go from that to being a founding partner of one of Australia's leading accounting groups? Where's the link there?
Mate, believe it or not, Lebanese rugby league players love numbers. No. Honestly, obviously played sport growing up, tried to make a football career before an accounting career. Mum and Dad done a really good job of telling me I need to have a backup plan in case I don't make it. And yeah, you didn't mention Australian rugby league player. Obviously, I didn't make it. I worked really hard on footy and all that for a long period of time, but was always studying kind of in the background. Just landed here.
And when did you start at Kelly+Partners?
10 years this year, 2014. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So had a bit of a journey.
And Nat, what was your path into Kelly+Partners?
Mine's actually quite funny. I did like multiple degrees and courses before I actually landed in accounting, which I find quite humorous now. When I think back to like the variety of things and courses that I went through to get to the point of becoming an accountant, I started with like a science-based degree in nutrition and then kind of gave that up because I realized I wasn't a scientist. And then I thought maybe I could be creative and dabbled in some interior design and photography. And then I kind of gave that up and just went traveling for a year and did like an overseas stint, as most younger people will do. And then I did like a hospitality and then a business course. And then I finally landed in accounting, which is just super weird, but I am a bit weird. So there you go.
I studied law and human movement before I got into marketing.
There you go.
Yeah. It's hard as an 18-year-old to be told, pick a career.
That's
Correct.
right.
Pick what you want to do for the rest of your life.
And I actually started at Kelly+Partners as an intern halfway through my accounting degree. I sent Danny a really great email and it was way too good for him to refuse. So I basically worked for Danny for free for about 3 months.
Danny, what did that email say? I need your recollection of what this email said.
Honestly, I teased Nat about this still. It was easily the worst written email I've ever received with no spacing. I just bag out the spacing on it, but just like in my head, a really bad email. But I literally had no money at the time in terms of starting the business. I was like, yeah, sweet, this person is willing to come help us out. So took a crack on it. Turned out to be the best person I could ever find. So very grateful.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my journey into Kelly+Partners. Started as an intern and then kind of have made my way up to partner in quite a short amount of time. But with that came a lot of hard work and dedication and, genuine fondness and keenness for the industry and the businesses that we work with.
Beautiful. And spell check now.
And, well, look, it was spelt fine and the content was great, but it was just that I was using Gmail and the spacing just wasn't amazing.
Very fair. It's an easy mistake. Now, do you look after mainly the e-commerce businesses within Kelly+Partners?
That's right, yeah. So Danny and I kind of really first learned e-commerce through Danny's wife's business, The Little Homie. She actually launched 8 years ago, so pretty much the exact same time that I started with Kelly+Partners. And it was a really great thing for Danny and I to kind of like be a part of because it forced us into learning what was required from an accounting point of view for an e-commerce brand. It's quite niche. Like all businesses are the same and all business require accounting, but e-commerce specifically is obviously quite niche and there's a lot of, stock issues and things that need to be worked through. We also like to look into like the non-financial KPIs, that side of things as well. So having the little homie to kind of like play around with from the beginning and, use it as our guinea pig to build out some really cool processes and how we could get some really good reporting for our clients. Yeah, we just kind of jumped on board on that and we were able to build out some pretty good processes, which we then replicated and executed for the rest of our clients. So yeah, but predominantly mine and my team work with e-commerce business owners, but Danny also specializes in it just by default because his wife has an e-commerce business. Yeah.
My wife said I had to, so.
Yeah.
And now she's like, get out of my business. Get out of here.
That's spot on. Like the having that business there to be able to think about it like from it. We were obviously thinking as a business owner as well as an accountant, like we were building everything out like it was ours because it was. But yeah, we got forced into having to do that for Jess. So we did.
How's the little homie going now?
She actually announced this week she's shutting down, to be honest, but just more from a lifestyle career perspective, but it's done amazing. So I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but she launched a book called AB to Jay-Z, which went viral around the world.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go. That's my wife. So went viral around the world, sold hundreds of thousands of copies, got sued by Jay-Z, had to open up international warehouse. Like we've done a lot of, in the 8 years of running it, we've had a lot of, ups and downs and really good stories. But yeah, Jess actually just made the decision now to call it quits more from she wants to, the kids are not babies anymore. She wants to get out of that world that she's been in and start something new. So we'll see what she does, but it means me and Nat have to find a new guinea pig to test all that stuff on.
I might get one out of this. Guinea pigs listening, put your hand up.
I think the biggest thing that we learned going through that process was the entry to e-commerce is really low. So if you think about like Jess, my wife, starting, it was like on the couch with no business experience, training, whatever. It's like, I'm going to start a business. So like, generally speaking, the knowledge base and everything is coming from a really low level from an accounting numbers perspective. So it's that support, I guess, that we try and bridge the gap on.
Yeah, and it's almost like, oh, shit, now I've got to learn tax. I've got to learn everything along because I've usually got a product idea or a customer idea.
Literally.
And that's where it starts. It's really funny that you said about Jess shutting down because of lifestyle factors. And it's funny that e-commerce is often positioned as like this beautiful lifestyle business where you can, set up a store and have 3PL and it all just runs without you. How do you find with some of the founders that you're working with, how are they feeling at the moment? Are they stressed? Are they kind of overworked, or are they feeling pretty good about where they're at? Nat, I might start with you on this one.
Look, I wish I could tell you that it's all rainbows and butterflies, but for the most part, we are seeing quite a bit of stress in a lot of the business owners that we work with that work in e-commerce. The ones that are not feeling, I guess, as stressed are the ones that are obviously doing really well, especially in the last, year or so where we've had global downturns and people have stopped spending money. And the ones that have kind of like come out the other end of that really well are the ones that, funnily enough, aren't as stressed. But what we're seeing is if you're a business owner and you work in e-commerce and you're invested in your numbers and you've got a really good team and, you're leading your team really well and you're kind of like very, very organized, then you're generally going to succeed. If you go, what does a successful e-commerce business owner look like to us? It is that it's super organized, really engaged with their team, with their stakeholders, really, really invested in their numbers and are willing to experiment and take a risk on things as well. And that comes with like systems, not just like experiment on product or whatever, but, experiment using different systems and things like that. So they're the ones that we're seeing are doing really well. The ones that are stressed are generally, not as invested in their numbers. So they've run quite blindly up to this point. And as a result, they're making decisions based on what they think is happening, which often isn't the case. And they usually just sit on things for a little bit too long and aren't willing to kind of like take the leap on certain things. So for the most part, we're seeing that people are feeling stressed and they're having to like go on discounts and things like that, as you've probably been made aware of. So that's kind of where I see things sitting at the moment.
They're kind of playing the game that's right in front of their face.
Correct. Yeah. There's like no kind of strategy behind what they're doing. They're just super reactive to what's going on. And that can often end you up in kind of like,
death spiral.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's a Warren Buffett saying, I think it's Warren Buffett, but like as the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And it's literally like, it's not e-commerce, it's all businesses. When times are good, things are pretty easy to be successful. When times are tough, the people that live on purpose, do things deliberately, have a plan generally.
Remember Alex and Danny from Kalani Keeney's? We interviewed them back on episode 208. Good news. Kalani Keeney's have continued their incredible growth with new international markets, social engagement, and, well, let's not beat around the bush, beautiful bodies. So when they looked to expand their business further with their B2B offering, they weren't going to slip into dad bod territory. They needed the experience to be as good, if not better, than the D2C experience. That's why they opted for Shopify Plus's B2B offering with customized collections based on size availability, mass add to cart from collection pages, and optimized conversion design. The result? A 3 times growth in B2B wholesale customers and a 60% revenue growth year on year. Talk about pleasing to the eye and to the accountant. If you want to explore B2B expansion for your brand, check out shopify.com/au/plus and get in touch with the Aussie Shopify Plus team to see how Shopify Plus can power your B2B business. When you talk about knowing your numbers, I'd love to dive into this because I know this will be very close to a lot of our listeners' hearts. What numbers are we talking about as a baseline? If you don't know this, then you're screwed. And then next level, like where is the gold often hidden?
Yeah. So the number one metric that everyone should be across is their gross profit margin. So without knowing what that actually is, it's really hard to, one, run your business and know how to spend your money. And two, it's really hard for us as advisors to help you with your business if you don't know what your gross profit margin is, because that's often going to dictate pretty much everything. Like, what can I spend on marketing and what can I spend on staff, and can I hire someone else, and can I open a warehouse and things like that. Like, we can't give you that answer unless your gross profit margin is, or your gross profit is correct.
What's a good gross profit look like in your books?
It's a minimum of, I mean, you've had Paul Waddy on your podcast before. He has his 50-30-20 rule. So we also agree with that. So like 50% is your baseline. Anything above that is obviously a bonus, and it means that you've got more money to play with in terms of like your marketing and your staffing and things like that. But 50% is baseline. Why we see, like, a lot of the clients that come through our door will probably tell us from the get-go that they know what their GP is, but 9 times out of 10, it's always wrong, unfortunately. And they've been making all of their decisions to date based on what they thought their gross profit margin was. So getting that right is really, really important. And where we generally see it's not correct is a lot to do with stock. So stock is like one of the biggest areas within any kind of product-based business to get correct. You're going to need like a really good, or it doesn't even have to be really good, you just have to be really good at managing it. But an inventory management software or an Excel, something, as long as you're good at managing it and as long as you know what actually needs to go into it from like a cost perspective, then you should theoretically be able to get a proper cost of goods sold number at the end of each period, month preferably, and you should know what your stock valuation is at the end of each month. So if you've got those two figures, then theoretically we should land at a pretty accurate gross profit margin. But 9 times out of 10, that's not happening. So 9 times out of 10. I'm going
to say 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. It happens every time.
I'm trying to be optimistic here, Danny.
It never happens. Like, people just, everyone says they know, and it, like, literally every single time we end up and we work with big brands. It's not like we're working with small brands. Just, it doesn't get the detail it deserves.
But, that's a basic, right? Knowing how much stock you've got and what goods you're selling. That seems pretty fundamental to ecom. Is it because it's not factoring returns, damaged stock?
So some of the common mistakes that we'll see when business owners are accounting for like the cost of their stock, say, is they might only consider the cost of the product itself as, what the stock is worth, but it's actually like the landed cost. So like the freight cost that it took to bring in, foreign exchange, import fees and everything like that. So that all needs to be factored in. So it's not just the cost of the product, it's the cost of actually bringing it into the country. And so that needs to be factored in. And then sometimes they might factor in things like GST and whatnot. GST wouldn't normally get included in that. So, and then also they might run into, I guess, issues if they're trying to apply like an average cost, say, to, a whole shipment that's got really expensive, really cheap kind of stock all in the one shipment, then that can kind of murky the waters as well. So
you need to break it down by category?
If they're dramatic, by SKU, yeah. Sometimes it's like not possible, but there are workarounds to kind of get it at least 80 to 90% accurate as opposed to it being completely wrong. So that's kind of like what we mostly will see come through. And then things like deposits. So like deposits for stock, they might get coded to stock on hand, but they should actually be deposits paid. So it's for stock not yet landed, but it also shouldn't be on your P&L because you haven't sold it yet. So there's so many different issues that could kind of arise from a accounting for stock perspective.
It's funny you say it's so basic, but like that's probably the 20% of the problems, as in like everyone has, most people have those problems, but there's 70% of people just don't do the basic of recording stock on hand and they just code everything to P&L. And obviously if it's a stable business, turning over, it kind of washes out in the wash, but most of the guys we're working with are trying to grow and growing their business. So their GP margin just doesn't make sense ever. And you've got all these spikes and drops and if we just fix the 70% of people doing that part, it probably makes our lives a lot easier. Then we can get the icing on the cake with all the things Nat's saying there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it is really basic and it just doesn't happen. It's crazy.
And from a system perspective, are you normally general use case, Shopify into Xero, or what are we looking at in normal system flow?
It depends on the business and it depends on the types of products that they're selling. And it also depends on whether, they're manufacturing their own products or they're changing the product once it's landed. Maybe they're adding things onto it. Maybe there's different variations that can be added on. If that's the case, then you're going to need a more complex, inventory management software. But we've got clients that do just use, say, Shopify for their inventory management software, and it works well because they've got just a few SKUs and there's no variations or anything like that. So that works fine. But if you've got multiple stores, bricks and mortar, and then you've got online, that's not going to work if you need to do transfers and things like that. So we are seeing a lot of our clients migrate to a proper inventory management software like Sin7s and the Unleashed of the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, we've got through one key metric, GM or GP. What else are you looking at?
Honestly, once we know what our gross profit margin is, the rest is a bit more similar, to work with. So the next two real big ones that we're looking at are at an OPEX level. So we're looking at how much you're spending on marketing as a percentage of your sales and how much are you spending on staffing. They're really, once you get past all your direct costs, they're the two biggest ones that are going to stand out on your P&L. Everything else is death by a thousand cuts. It's kind of immaterial. So we're really kind of honing in on those two categories for the most part. Would you agree, Danny?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And do you have a good benchmark for those as a percentage of total rev?
Yeah, again, it depends on the business and how much gross profit you've got to kind of play with. But I personally think that as a standard benchmark, you'd be spending 15%-ish on marketing. And again, depending on whether you're online only or you've got physical stores as well, between 10 and 15% on staffing.
And where you are in your journey, obviously when you're starting out, you can't hit those metrics. It's hard to hit those metrics in day one because you've just got a baseline marketing and staff costs. And, we're okay with people going over those benchmarks. So we don't sit here and go, hey, here's the benchmark, don't go past it. It's more here's a baseline. If we decide we want to speed, going back to running your business on purpose with the data to make decisions, if we go, hey, we want to speed up the growth, we're going to invest heavier into marketing, happy days. There's nothing that stops us, but you're doing it deliberately with a decision, with a team making, pulling levers as we're going, not just blindly Facebook. I've seen a guy, he came to us and he had a 200 grand Facebook debt, debt to Facebook for all these ads that he was running that weren't actually at all profitable. I'm like, man, you've got no choice but to liquidate here. There's actually no path away from this. But they take marketing as the pill to it's not the solution. So more often than not, it's not the answer.
Yeah. And I think just kind of piggybacking on that, because they feel like it is a solution, they are just throwing money at it in so many areas as well. It's not kind of a focused strategy when it comes to marketing. I've had a client come through recently once we tidied everything up, we could see that she was spending around 35% on marketing, which is quite high. And then when we kind of drill down into all the different categories, she's paying an agency and she's got two girls internally doing marketing and she's got another agency that's doing another type of marketing and then she's doing her, and it was just all over the place and it wasn't working. So it's kind of it blows my mind that business owners are okay with spending 35% of their revenue and actually not having a handle on what's going on. And when you ask them, do you know if it's working for you or do you know what your ROI is, they would have no idea. And it's how are you comfortable spending all that money? So,
and that's without saying the client's name, Gaffer, what were they? What's that business turning over?
About 2 mil a year.
Yeah, it's not huge, but it's not immaterial either.
Yeah.
You're doing 200 grand a month.
Yeah.
I get a feeling that a lot of founders are I don't want to disturb the processes or the balance. So say I've got those internal people plus an agency, the wheels are staying on, so I've just got to keep going without...
They think the wheels are staying on, but Nate, there's an ATO debt building up, or they've taken a shift loan, or they've spoken to Wayflyer. They're plugging the holes in other ways that are almost unseen, relatively unseen. It just gets to a tipping point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Nat, I was really interested earlier in our chat. You said that it was really important to look at the non-financial KPIs as well. For e-commerce businesses, what are some of the non-financial KPIs that you really like to look at?
Yeah, so we're looking at LTV, so lifetime value of customer. We're looking at total orders each month. We're looking at customer acquisition costs each month. And then we're also looking at number of new customers and number of repeating customers. So they're the main, and average order value.
Yeah, they're financial and non-financial. So that's not entirely non-financial, but they're not like kind of P&L related KPIs. And then, as Nat said, like we're pulling in the order values and things to kind of work out the counts for people because, again, they don't do it themselves.
Yeah, they're more e-commerce metrics than they are accounting metrics. On the marketing side, just to go back there briefly, question I had for you there is, from an accounting perspective, do you treat marketing that might be directly attributable to sales? So, for example, Facebook ads where you go, yep, that click-through equaled this sale, versus more above the line or even branded campaigns where it might be a billboard or even people opening up stores to say, look, we expect the store to break even, but really it's a marketing and a branding awareness. Do you treat them differently from an accounting perspective?
I don't think we do. Like, we bucket it into a bucket, but we don't, like, as I said before, like, don't care if they go over, if they've made the decision to do the billboard. Like, we want another point probably we didn't touch on before, like the guys that are successful are making long-term brand decisions and building community versus, the short-term Facebook fix. So we want to see that spending happening. We want that spending to be in our marketing costs. So we just want it to be deliberate and made with some thought, not just throw the money at every bus and billboard that you think of and see what happens.
There just needs to be some strategy and thought behind it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But we bucket it all together, so we don't separate.
Yeah, it's below the line, so we don't have it sitting up in direct costs or anything like that. But we do go into the detail of breaking down the different categories inside marketing so that we can easily pinpoint what was spent on Facebook, what was spent on photo shoots, influencers, etc. So we can kind of like get really in the detail and go, where do we need, like what's working, what's not kind of thing.
Do you find that that's a problem for a lot of e-commerce businesses, is the attribution of where the sales are coming from?
Yeah, it's impossible to know completely. It's really hard. They've made it harder and harder. Like, I think that's on purpose too. Like, the murkier they can make it, the more you feel like you can't get away.
Yeah, makes sense. From Australian ecom perspective, when it comes to running an e-commerce business, we've obviously got a lot more data out there now because of the ASX, and we've got a lot more visibility on brands who are doing it well. Who do you hold up? Like, because we've talked about some businesses that might be struggling, especially smaller founder-led businesses. Who do you reckon's doing it really well?
Like, because we've done this as part of our Prezzo, our retail press. Like, we broke out Booktopia, Adore Beauty, and I don't remember, what was the underwear brand called?
Step one
underwear brand. And like, obviously Adore Beauty and Booktopia are a lot bigger brands in our minds, at least. But when you break out the Step One underwear's numbers, they are actually killing it. Like, their margin's amazing. Their marketing, they're spending like heaps more on marketing as a percentage, but they're getting the customer acquisition. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think they're making 20 mil profit a year.
They were operating on close to 70% margin and then spending 38% on marketing. Yeah.
So like, now I benchmark against them essentially when we're looking at stuff, because I think they're doing unreal. So
yeah, we had Greg on the show almost 2 years ago now. Yeah. Okay. Good value.
It's done amazing. It really has.
It actually blows my mind. It's men's underwear. It's so niche. It's ridiculous. But yeah, he's done very, very well.
I hope you bought shares when it kind of did that little dip and then it's on its way back up again.
I'm going to keep buying, mate. Don't worry. I'll just average cost my way in there.
This is not a financial podcast. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. In terms of like in general, we've got probably 40 or 50 brands we work with now. So we've got enough data within our own database essentially to benchmark. And like, they're ranging from 50 mil turnover to 50 grand. So we've got enough data essentially now internally.
If you were to start an e-commerce business today, what kind of e-commerce business would you start? Because we've got all sorts now, right? We've got omni-channel, we've got subscription, we've got D2C, we've got wholesale, we've got B2B. Where do you think the money is in e-com?
I think about this all the time, and I try and think about like, what would I sell? Because I love products. I do. I love shopping. I love products. That's why I'm in e-commerce accounting, just to make it a little bit more fun for me. But I personally would sell online only, right? And I would sell apparel just because I personally love buying clothing, caps, bags, belts, things like that. So I would not try and reinvent the wheel. I would just pick a product that I like or a few products that I like and just try and do them better. And I would sell only online.
Okay. You don't think there is that movement that we're seeing at the moment of D2C brands
purely coming from a lazy point of view, where I already have
the answer I expect from an accountant.
This is me. This isn't a world where I'm still an accountant. I'm still running a team in an accounting firm. I would do purely online. But no, I know where you're going with that. And I do, we've got a lot of clients that are online wholesale, omni-channel, so online wholesale and, a couple of stores at least. And there's arguments for and against for sure. But I will say that you're never going to be able to make a decision as to what works for your business if you are not doing the accounting properly and you're not looking at your reporting properly, dead set. So we took on a pretty big client recently, revenue-wise and profit-wise, but had zero kind of processes in place. Data was all over the place. We did a nice big cleanup. And in our first meeting, we were going through our first lot of beautiful reports. And before we'd even started, she was, we asked them to share any news with us and how they're feeling and things like that. And she said, I hate wholesale. I hate the wholesale side of my business. It eats away too much time. And I just hate dealing with the wholesalers basically. And I was like, do you know what percentage of your revenue your wholesale channel makes? And she was like, I would have no idea. So I was like, well, lucky we have these beautiful reports that we're about to go through. So I've opened them up and I said, it actually only makes up 6% of your total revenue. So if you want to get rid of it, by all means, go for it. So ecom online was 94% of her business. Wholesale was 6%. So there's definitely arguments for and against.
Yep, that's a really great example. Thank you. Danny, what are you starting?
Mate, I'm taking some of the lessons from Jess's business and just reapplying them. So we done the kids' book as a starting product, had 95% GP margin. I'm trying to find another product like that.
Yep.
We went into clothing and things like that. I know Nat said apparel then, but the returns and the sizes and having to deal with 7 colorways and all the just meant that you're holding so much more inventory and so much more back and forth and packaging and etc. was a pain in the ass because you had to have different stuff. So I'm trying to find a product that's fits in one product that I don't have to have all these different sizes and colors. And I'm probably the downside of Jess's product like AB to JZ was that you order it once, you order it maybe twice, but it's not something that you're coming back for often, which is an upside of clothing. If you get them into the community, they keep coming. But I'm trying to find something like protein or something like that where once you're on the hook, I'm getting you there every 3 months or whatever, 6 weeks, the muscle meals that we get here or delivered every week. So trying to play in that space, mate. Repeat orders, no returns, good shipping.
And ideally not quickly perishable either.
Not quickly perishable, yeah, agree.
Oh God. Okay. All right. We'll leave that one with us. We'll come up with an idea.
I'd stay away from clothing personally just because it's hard. And
but Nat's going to go get some good accountants to look after that side of the business. When you just
also, I know good clothing products. So.
Yeah. Everyone says that. It's your taste, but you get to the market and they've got a different taste. The comment you made about the 3PLs is true. And we got the 3PLs for Jess's business and it was amazing. Shipping your own products to get the 3PL to do everything does change your life. So definitely use 3PL, but you lose a lot of flexibility with that also. So you can't do your, special gift wrapping and stuff like that. So you got your pros and cons always.
You're handing over the last mile effectively.
Correct.
How was your last e-commerce delivery experience? Did your order arrive on time and undamaged? Or did it fail to fulfill expectations? If you are a high-value brand, just think about the low-value experiences in the last mile affecting your reputation. Delivered in full on time, or DIFOT if you're in a hurry, is a metric that matters for retailers and customers. Why? Because it shows whether deliveries are happening reliably and on time. Many Aussie retailers are settling for 70 to 80% DIFOT scores and dealing with a lot of unhappy customers. However, after partnering with Deliver In Person, experience-driven brands like Samsonite, The Party People, and July see a consistent 99.6% DIFOT score. Don't settle for less. Make your last mile experience the first thing that customers remember. Learn more at deliverinperson.com.
One thing that I'm picking up from our conversation is how important it is to be organized and to have processes before you even start looking at the numbers. Like, it feels like there's a little bit to unpack around what does that look like? What does an organized e-commerce business looks like? Before you even start analyzing it, are there some simple processes in place that you go, if you just did this on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that you're going to be in such a better position to have a view over your business?
Do you mean from a numbers perspective, or just
from a numbers, costs, profit perspective?
Yeah. Firstly, I mean, this might sound really basic, but I do see a direct correlation between super successful run businesses and, being super responsive. So I've got some clients that they are super responsive, right? You'll write to them, you'll ask them questions, and it'll be questions around hey, I need to know X, Y, Z so that I can finish this piece of work for you. They'll respond straight away. And I imagine that they are like that with, all of their kind of suppliers and stakeholders and things like that. And they're the ones that generally run a really tight ship, and they're the ones that generally will do really well. The ones that where I have a meeting with them and they seem super engaged, and then the meeting ends, and then I'll send a follow-up email and I'll say, this is what I need to get X, Y, Z done. They will not respond for 2-3 months, right?
Or get lost in the tornado at work.
Yeah. So it's super slow moving. You can never get anything done. All these great ideas that we wanted to try execute on just won't happen, right? So one is just being really engaged and responsive. But from a processes and numbers point of view, you definitely need to have a good bookkeeper in place. So, and bookkeepers won't necessarily solve the process issue. So you still need to solve that process issue, but having a good bookkeeper or an accountant that you engage to do your bookkeeping is critical in getting your data right. Before that comes, I would suggest that there is a process in place. So when we're talking ecom, we're talking about closing off every single month properly. So what that looks like is we're splitting out all your different sales channels, because otherwise you're just going to have one line item that says sales and it literally tells you nothing other than a number. And so we're splitting those up. We're making sure that we're taking up your merchant fees, because merchant fees don't happen automatically inside your Xero file. They have to be manually taken up. We are taking up your discounts, your refunds. We're making sure your GST's been, accounted for properly, your GST on imports, and that you're not paying GST on your foreign sales. And, a few other things to kind of tidy up the data. A lot around timing as well. So making sure that your costs are being taken up in the right period, things like that. So that's what a good kind of process will look like. And then you'll need a bookkeeper or an accountant to kind of implement that process. So that's what I think a good kind of bookkeeping data process looks like.
I think personality-wise, fundamentally, you're spot on. If we don't have, business owner personalities, and that's probably, again, more evident in e-commerce than in other industries, because the barrier to entry is so easy. To run the accounting firm, you have to have done 7 or 8 years as an accountant. It just doesn't happen otherwise. So there really is that gap of, I woke up one day and now I'm a business owner, but I'm not really a business owner. So personality, and I'll talk about Jess, my wife. She isn't an entrepreneur by nature. That's just not who she is. She's an amazing creative person that, she had Nat and I to push and drive the direction of the business, which helped her. But her natural instinct isn't to hustle on the weekend to get that next kind of sale or whatever open.
And it can spin out of control pretty quickly if you don't have these processes, can build up tax debts, can build up liabilities pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. So become insolvent without even recognizing it, that's the scariest part.
I think the front end ego hits just distracted gaffer. You launch your business and you get your mates pat you on the back, you start to get some sales through, and when you get to $100,000, $200,000, whatever a month, and you just don't backfill the process.
Yeah, and you're getting the Shopify Bing all the time on your phone. You're like,
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It feels good.
It feels good. We got the hit.
Yeah, without some process or without someone there to kind of pull it back in, they keep acting like they're doing things correctly because they don't know any different.
And then outside of that as well, like once the month has been closed off from an accounting point of view, like actually taking the time to then run your reports and look at your numbers. So whether you're doing that on your own, which is fine as well, as long as you know that the process is correct and the data is correct, it's fine for you to run those numbers on your own. But obviously, like some people aren't going to be able to read a P&L and know exactly what it's telling you. So at a minimum, looking at it on your own, but even better than that, sitting down with your accountant or your advisor and actually going through them top to bottom and really drilling down into all the main, the key accounts and like, how much is it costing you to do this? And can I be putting on someone else to do this? And, going through all those questions that you might have and actually being able to make an educated decision behind them. So, yeah, I think like having that process is the foundation to truly being able to make some really great decisions and being able to like grow your business.
And just last question on the process piece. Difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant. Is bookkeeper, in my head, they're reconciling everything to make sure all the data goes in. Is that a fair assumption, or is there a lot more to bookkeeping than what I'm putting to it?
Yeah, that's basically it. So they'll do the reconciling, but then they can also take up like manual journals and things like that. So if we build them out a process step by step, take up this journal to do this, X, Y, Z, they can follow that as well. But they're not going to be able to approach things from like a strategic point of view or anything like that. They'll just get the data clean and they'll follow the process.
Yeah. Great.
And when you separate accountant, split accountant, like there's tax accountant that most people probably kind of bucket all accounting into doing your compliance, but then there's like your financial control and CFO kind of advisory stuff, which is probably where Nat and her team do a lot more of their great work. Anyone can kind of do your BAS and your tax return. Most of the time we pick them up, it's wrong, but it's largely
Anyone
right.
can do it badly.
Yeah, it's mostly correct, but that's what most people think about their accountant as. They're not thinking about the other stuff. But yeah, so there's probably 4 different roles there, not 2.
And I get that a lot from our conversation already, is that you're thinking about it from a business perspective, not just how to make the numbers right. And something you mentioned earlier was around taking the right risks, because we've talked a lot around avoiding risk and just getting the basics right. When it comes to e-commerce businesses and you're helping guide them on the risks that they can take, which I think is great when you talk about accountants, because normally it's not something that you talk about when it comes to accounting. But when you are talking about the risks you can take as an e-commerce business, generally where does your advice or your head go to?
That's a really good question. One thing that comes to mind straight away is like really recently, like we're not here, trying to encourage our clients to take on debt as an example, but if it's being taken on from a strategic point of view, then we will kind of like encourage it. So a specific example to answer that question is, had a client recently and they're in a bit of a, I guess, cash flow hole at the moment, like a lot of e-commerce business owners are. But he's hit the nail on the head with this certain product line, right? And he knows that if he can just, buy a shit ton of it, he'll be able to sell through it within, 2 months easily. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, if and it's, it's at a 60 or 70% margin. So like, that's like, okay, cool. Let's try and get some funding, go and buy a whole bunch of that stock and let's sell through it, right? So that's like a bit of like an educated risk-taking decision, if that makes sense.
But you can take that risk because you know that GP is correct and is solid.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The funding the growth of e-commerce is really hard. Like why a lot of owners get stuck is even if we show them a P&L that's making profit, a lot of that profit goes to reinvesting in inventory. So they're not actually seeing any cash in their bank account. So they are constantly having to make decisions around how much of that cash am I tying up or getting debt to offset it. But yeah, like spot on, like having those margins, understanding the business, like Nat's saying there, like we're not there to push them into debt, but just give them the comfort of this is what it looks like if you do this and it works. Like the hardest part is guaranteeing the sales. Obviously we can't guarantee the sales side of it, but that's their part of expertise, but like modeling through it is...
You can model pathways for them.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a great chat, guys. I really appreciate that because it gives us a really good idea, I think, for business owners, especially at this time in the world where I think the downturn has gone on a lot longer than many had expected or hoped for. And there's a lot of founders out there that are just kind of hanging in there. So I think if there's any message that you can take out of this is like, don't just get stuck in the day-to-day, what's in front of you. Make sure you're understanding your GP, understanding those key metrics, and then putting the processes in place to help you make those strategic decisions that you're going to have to act on pretty quickly.
I think it's like business is lonely as well. Like to layer on top of that, it's a lonely, hard place, but you're not in it. Like get some comfort that you're not the only one in that position sometimes. So reach out and kind of work on it. Don't just let it, kill you slowly.
That makes a lot of sense. Guys, what's next for yourselves and Kelly+Partners? What's coming up in the next 12 months? Nat, I might start with you.
Yeah. So we are trying to get out in the community as much as we can. So we are trying to differentiate ourselves or detach ourselves from what people generally kind of like think of an accountant or an accounting firm. So we're trying to get out in the community as much as we can. We're doing things like Retail Fest and presenting at Retail Fest. We're jumping on this podcast. We're doing our own events as well. So we've done 3 e-commerce events. They're face-to-face events, basically like bringing a whole bunch of ecom owners together for some drinks and some food. You know, we're going to be doing a lot more online virtual workshops around e-commerce accounting. We're going to be doing more face-to-face workshops as well. So we're just trying to, get out there as much as possible and try and make it fun as well. I think that's probably like the biggest differentiating factor is like try and make accounting as fun as possible, try and be as engaging as possible and really show that we're seeing things from the business owner's side. We're not just approaching things from like a tax compliance point of view, which most accountants will. We really, truly do kind of sit on the business owner's side. And we just want to kind of communicate that and get out as much as possible.
I love it. Well, I can attest to the event at Retail Fest. It was a lot of fun.
That's good. I think to layer on top of that, at a group level, we've opened Kelly+Partners in the US, a couple offices, and we're going to do a fair bit more in the US and the UK and Europe over the next few years. So we're trying to bridge that gap of knowledge as these brands go global, that we can actually kind of help them wherever they are in the world.
Is that you trying to pick up your rugby league international?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
It's also me trying to move to Italy.
That's right. Sourcing trip for the new quote.
Yeah, new office. Yeah, we're going every trip tax deductible is essentially what we're trying to get to.
Brilliant. Nat and Danny, if people have listened to this and they want to get in touch with you or find out more about what Kelly+Partners do, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think just you can send us a message on LinkedIn. So I'm Natalie McDermott, MC, DERMOTT, and Danny Chiha, that's CHIHA, not the chia seed. So message either one of us on LinkedIn. And then we also have Instagram. It's Kelly+Partners Northern Beaches is our office. So you can search that on Instagram or hit up our website. We have like an e-commerce in the industry section, e-commerce page, so you can get in touch through that as well.
Beautiful. Nat, Danny, thank you for joining us on Add to Cart. That was a lot of fun. I feel like we only just scratched the surface. There's a lot more there, but really enjoyed that, and I think you've helped a lot of listeners, so thank you.
Appreciate it, mate.
You.
I don't know about you, but I haven't had too many conversations with accountants that are as free-flowing and natural as that one. You can tell that Danny and Nat really do bleed e-commerce. They've been in the trenches with their e-commerce founders, helping them get through some tough times, some great times, and making sure that they've got a sustainable business at the end of it. Here are the 3 main lessons that I took away from that conversation with Danny and Nat. Number 1, gross profit is number 1. Get your gross profit margin correct. Danny and Nat say that usually their clients bring them this figure, and it is wrong. Gross profit is the figure from which everything else comes, so it has to be correct. Common mistakes include leaving out the import tax, not getting stock inventory right, not taking a holistic view of the cost of that product. Danny and Nat say that if anything, make sure you get a clear understanding of what your GP buy product is to be able to run a successful business. Number 2, get financial help. Danny and Nat, of course they would, but they said get a good bookkeeper and an accountant who can close off properly on a monthly basis. Don't get to the point where I know it's easy to do, is letting it run and then going back and trying to reconcile and make sense of months and months of information. Have the right team by your side if you are not a numbers person to make sense of what you've got so that you can make the right decisions. You don't necessarily have to be in the detail of every number, but you need people around you who can, so that you're working with real data and up-to-date data. Number 3, marketing as a percentage of cost. Danny and Nat said that, depending on what business you're in and what stage of business you're in, marketing costs can fluctuate. But as a guide, they said that marketing should be about 15% of your total sales, unless you have made a specific decision to either spend more or spend less based on the time of year, new product launches, or your risk profile. But about 15% was the number that they said marketing as a percentage of total revenue.
Before you go, we'd love to invite you to join our free e-commerce learning platform, Add to Cart Campus. Meet other professionals and learn from e-commerce experts to take your business and your e-commerce career to the next level. Register to join Campus at addtocart.com.au/campus. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you share it with a friend or a colleague, or even better, leave us a review on Spotify or Apple. It really makes a difference.